You are now listening to Renewed Mind Revolution podcast with your host, Michelle Cook Hall. Please begin to take that good deep breath as we begin to refresh, recharge, and reset. Let's go. Today's podcast is brought to you by Faith vs. Fear, Breaking Family Ties, now available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. You are now listening to Renewed Mind Revolution podcast with your host, Michelle Cook Hall. Welcome to Renewed Mind Revolution podcast. I am your host, Michelle Cook Hall. As always, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and my pleasure to be able to share some tips and some tools with you that I know will assist you in becoming a better you. I say that sincerely. I say that with all my heart, that it really is my honor and my pleasure to be able to come to you on a weekly basis and just share some tips, just share a little, a little inspiration. I'm hoping and praying that these podcasts are giving you a little hope. It's giving you a little light at the end of that tunnel. I do understand what it feels like to feel as if you are at your ends, that you just can't take one more thing, one more day, one more tragedy, one more issue, problem, or situation. Oftentimes I have seen on social media where people are kind of making fun of being adult. And the things that I hear is that adulting is overrated. I hear things like, people wanting to go back and be children again because being an adult is hard and it's difficult. And it is. It's challenging. And to be honest, I think that young people are having it pretty tough too. So life itself brings challenges and it brings moments. But I want to believe, and I want to say this, I believe that this develops your character. I believe that it develops your character. And so although these things are hard, although these things are difficult, although these things are challenging that we face on a day-to-day basis, I believe that it's going to develop you. It's going to develop your character. It was a question that was brought up in one of my courses. And before I get started today, I want to bring this up to you. There was an individual in the course that asked about suffering. And asked, do they believe that in order for us to really get the fullness of what God is to us and what He needs to be to us, do we have to have suffering? Does suffering play a part in it? And I volunteered to answer this question from my own perspective. And I think I shared this with you guys before in a previous podcast, but let me share quickly with you again. What I share to prove my point of yes, I believe that we all will have some form of suffering. And I believe this is something in order for us to apply the Word of God and get a better understanding the Word of God. In order for us to understand certain things that we're reading and that we're studying, we have to go through certain things. And what I used to validate this point was the story of when I was constantly asking God for the peace that surpasses understanding. And at one point in my life, I thought that I had experienced this peace that surpasses all understanding. I did share this with you guys before, but for those who are new to this podcast, hear the story. I thought that I had understood this concept of this peace that surpasses understanding, which means that it doesn't make sense to have peace in the midst of a situation, right? It just, everything, naturally is calling for me and you to just, lose it, go off, be worried, be stressed out, be frustrated, be whatever. But, there's this peace that just makes no sense for the situation, for the condition. So I was always praying and asking for this. And I thought I had experienced it, to be honest with you. But then there was a time in my life where I was experiencing so much grief. I mean, I lost so many family members, so many personal things that were going on in my life, and then physical things as well, all at the same time. And so at this one particular time where I was just like, felt like, okay, this could be the moment where I lose everything, right? There was a peace that came out of nowhere. It made no sense. I had this calmness, I had this ease. I recognized it because it was so strong. It was so authentic. It was so real. It made no sense. Everything in me should have been shattered. Everything in me should have been shooken. But I had this calmness. I had this really, really, really weird calmness and peace. And I remember as I was experiencing this, hearing, this is the peace that surpasses all understanding. This is the peace that from the outset would make no sense to have in this scenario. And so the point of me saying this is that my answer to my classmate was, all of us, your suffering or your struggle might not be as mine, and yours might be greater than mine. It might be not as, great, less great than mine, but it doesn't matter. We all have our own measure that we receive. And I think in order for us to understand, what we're saying and what we're teaching and what we're sharing, there has to be moments in our lives where that word comes to life. That word comes to life. And I think the Bible tells us that trials and tribulations come to make us strong. It's not coming to defeat you. It's not. This is why I do this podcast, because a lot of times we live behind this curtain of, you have to be a martyr. You have to be, like this broken vessel, in order to be kingdom, of God. And the fact is, the Bible says that it does not come to break us. Trials and tribulations comes to do what? Make us strong. Okay, to make us strong. So I believe that there is a development in character. I believe there's a development in character when we go through certain things. And I think that alone kind of shows even why I do this podcast, because the experiences, the things that I personally went through developing character has given me an opportunity to share with someone else. And so I think that it's important for us to understand that, you do have purpose. You do have something that you need to do. And sometimes it's through our suffering that those things come out. And that's a fact. Many people I hear of their testimonies, their great testimonies, and it comes from their passions, and their purpose come from their great testimonies. Is what I'm trying to say. And to get to the next point that I want to get to, I have the awesome honor and the pleasure of being able to interview someone coming up in November the 11th at 11:30 a.m. I will be posting this here on this podcast. And her name is Michelle Saunders, and she's going to talk about the emotional healing of a childhood cult survivor. So once again, we get to look at the moment where someone's testimony, they had to go through something, they had to go through a trial, they had to go through some type of suffering, but from that comes their testimony, and from that comes their purpose, because now this is what she's doing. She's in ministry, and she's teaching other people based upon her own experiences, and that's what we're supposed to do, is share with one another. So, okay, let's get to what we're going to talk about today. I did that long intro to talk about what we're going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about today, and we're not going to be long, as I always say to you guys, we're not going to be long, but we're going to talk about the waiting game. Come on. The waiting game. Ooh, I have so much that I could say about the waiting game. This might be a 2-part series. I have so much that I could share about the waiting game, because it covers so much, right? There's so many things that we can spend our time on, just waiting and just waiting and just waiting and just waiting. And the reason I want to talk about the waiting game is because sometimes that waiting game, the posture that you and I choose to have during the waiting game determines a lot. So we're all talking about today about developing our character. And so, the way that we handle that, the way that we handle this waiting game, that determines a lot about the ending, the character, the development process. Because everything is, this journey is a process. That was like the first book that I ever wrote, was This Journey is a Process. So this journey is a process. The journey that you and I are on, and we have had the pleasure of connecting on this journey, because if you're listening to me, although you've never seen me, probably heard, spoke to me, one-on-one, or seen me physically, we have connected because now you're listening to this podcast. So we connected on our journey. We all have a journey that we're walking on. And what's so unique about our journey is everybody's journey has different things that come up. And we've all heard about like roadblocks and stumbling blocks and all these things that come on our journey. We have, people who come in our lives during our journey, people who drop off in our lives during our journey, but they all play a huge part on our journey. I remember several years ago where, the Lord kind of taught me that some people are with you just seasonal. We want to keep them in our life forever. And sometimes it's not to be that way, because then they fall off and we heartbroken and we don't understand why they fall off. Just the relationship kind of just, drizzles out and you kind of wonder what happened, what's wrong? What did I do? Or what did they do? And sometimes it's just that it has fulfilled its course. And so you need not to try to keep holding on to people that you need to just let go because they were seasonal. And then there's people in your life forever. Like, they play a huge part in every stage of your life. It's just, we need to understand and recognize in our journey those type of things. People who are there seasonal, people who are there for the long term. We just need to know those things because it helps alleviate a lot of pain, a lot of stress, a lot of frustration. Because a lot of times we're crying over people and situations that we shouldn't. A lot of times we are trying to figure out, what did we do wrong? What did they do? What did they do wrong? And it's just the fact that it was just for that moment. You poured into them, they poured into you, good. And then that was the completion of that assignment, and you need to learn to move on. So we all are here on this journey, all of us, and we all learn different lessons along the journey. We're supposed to learn. A lot of times I feel that we are stuck too long in certain things because we are trying to manipulate the journey. We're trying to do things our way. We're trying to figure it out our way. We're holding on to people that we shouldn't hold on to. We're pushing people away that's supposed to stay. I mean, there are just different things that we're doing that causes a lot of mayhem in our journey. I think we all do this here and there, some big and some small. But then there's a moment along our journey that it's a waiting game. You're just waiting for that next. And sometimes, depending on how long you wait, it can become very tedious and frustrating and agitating. And that posture can take a whole form of its own and become a little monster in our life. And so it is important that when we're waiting on the next, when we're waiting on the next job, the next home, the next career move, the next relationship, the next whatever it is, the next ministry, whatever you need to go, the next assignment. Some people are just saying, I'm just waiting to hear what the Lord want me to do and where I should go and what is next, right? And so you wait on this waiting game. Or some people who are trying to have a baby, they're married and they have accomplished everything that they wanted to do, but they're waiting on this baby to come, right? And they're in between of this waiting game, and so that becomes stressful. It can become stressful and agitating and frustrating is the words that I'm using today. But the thing is, the position, our posture that we have during this waiting game, it's important. We all are going to experience a waiting game. Let me emphasize that again. We all are going to experience a waiting game, whether it is results from a doctor, whether it is an email back from an employer for promotions, people who are going through legal issues, waiting to hear that phone call, that email. I mean, we are all at some point, whether big or small, hear me again, it will play the waiting game. And so it's just important, the posture. I'm going to say that because that's important to reiterate. We're talking about our posture during the waiting game. How are we positioning ourselves? Are we positioning ourselves in fear of the unknown? Are we positioning ourselves in faith, understanding that all things is going to work out for our good? Like, once again, there is not this great God out here trying to sabotage your life and make everything miserable. He's just not trying to send you through a whole course of trauma and drama. And I say this because oftentimes listening to us talk, you would imagine people speaking of God as if God is just this big, being who is getting a kick out of maneuvering people's lives into chaos. And that's not God. That is not his plans for you. That's not scripture. That's not anything. And I don't want you to think that. I want you to understand that he has plans for you. Yes, you. Even you who have fell off and have not talked to God in like 10 to 15 years. Yes, even you are welcome. Even you are accepted and loved by God. Please understand that. And so don't think that this is not catered to you, because it is for you just as well. We all make mistakes and we all fall short. And I don't want you to feel as if you deserve a lot of bad things coming your way. Sometimes I've said this 1,000 times because I've heard it a lot throughout my whole life, that, when people make mistakes, and I do mean just mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're flawed. That's why Christ had to come, because we are flawed human beings. Doesn't mean that we go around just practicing, doing whatever and being sinful. No. Hurting people and hurting ourselves. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who have made mistakes, and now they have a heart of wanting to be forgiven and reset, right? Try all over again. And so for that, understand that you're not pushed aside, you're not forgotten, you're not unloved. Please don't think that. You are loved and you are cared for and you are treasured and you are beautiful and you are accepted by God. Please understand that, because we all make mistakes, no matter if people have been in church their entire life and those who have not stepped in a door. You are loved and you are treasured. Please understand that. We all have this journey, and we all are going to experience moments where we are challenged, and moments that we are tempted, and moments that we're pulled or attempted to be pulled to the side. And sometimes some of us take a rest, and it seems like we're sitting there forever, instead of continuing on. The whole part of this journey is that we persevere. I think that's extremely important, is that you persevere and that you keep moving and you keep pushing. Despite what comes your way, despite what comes to hinder you, despite what comes to distract you, because we all going to get those distractions and things that want to halt your progress. And so it's important that you understand all this comes on our journey. But there's something about this waiting game. There's something about the position of you and I doing this waiting game, our posture, and how are we looking at our waiting game? Are we looking at it in fear? Are we looking at it from a place of faith and understanding that it's going to work out? I don't see the results. I don't see the ending of this, but it will work out. It's something about encouraging yourself. It's something about speaking life. It's something about, understanding that when you get to a low point, to go find whatever it is that you need to, get to get you back up out of that place of darkness and that valley moment. Because we all throughout this journey will have a valley moment, especially when you are in the waiting game. Okay, especially when you are waiting for that answer. It is so quick to get into this valley type of attitude, valley type of moment. And so during those moments and during those times, what is your posture? Are you going to feed into the frenzy? Are you going to feed into the fear? Or are you going to encourage yourself? Are you going to get into whatever it is that motivates you? For me, I've shared 1,000 times, what gets me moving and what motivates me is listening to worship music, and meditating and praying and speaking out loud of empowerment to myself, encouraging myself, speaking the word of the Lord over myself. Those are the things that get me up and moving. We all will feel down at some point. All of us, no matter how big our smiles are, no matter how happy our demeanor is, all of us will have something in our life that's going to challenge us, every one of us. And so during those times, we have to find or make sure that we have in place a plan. So while you're in your waiting game, because we're going to have a waiting game, and you're going to have multiple waiting games. And how are you handling that? Because once you've, overcome this part, there's something else that you're going to have to wait and deal with. And how are you going to handle that? How are you going to position yourself? If you accomplish this and you worked it out and you accomplished it and you came out victorious, you conquered it, how are you going to handle the next? Because this next one might be more challenging. This next one might hit a little harder. And that's just a growth. It develops, once again, we're talking about, it develops character. It develops character. And so it's amazing to me because the things that we think is not teaching us, the things that we think that we're not learning from, we are learning from. We are definitely being taught. We are definitely growing and maturing and progressing from it if we allow it to do what it's supposed to do. And so the position that I would really want all of you all to take today, if you find yourself right now just waiting, you're in the waiting game, I want you to take the position of victory. I know it seems hard. I know what your mind is telling you. I know what the situation and circumstances is telling you. I know what the report is telling you. I know what the email has said. I get what the voicemail has said. I get you. I hear you loud and clear. But take it from somebody who has experienced all of that, right? And had that play over and over in their head. I get it. But finding this strength in the midst of that and going back to what I know, which is that God He will provide, He will do it, He will fulfill His word. Me going back to that changes everything. There was so many moments in my life where I was told, this is it, no, sorry, and it was defeating. It was defeating. But once I went back to what I know and apply that to my life, and began to speak and encourage, and sometimes it is best to not share everything with everybody when you're going through these type of moments, because too much talking to you at that time is not good. Everybody has their own opinion, they have their own views, and it clashes sometimes. So you want to be focused and you want to hear, what is right and what is clear, and the directions that you need to go. So you need to stay focused. And sometimes it's hard to stay focused. I explained it to this person one time. I said, it was like, two people were talking in my ear about something. I had two individuals who was trying to tell me their opinions about something, and it became so chaotic that I could not hear from God. And so I had to shut that out, stop sharing information and talking to them about it completely, like just no longer share that conversation at all. And that's when I saw things change. I was able to make better choices, and I was able to listen and hear what the Lord wanted me to do next, and it works. It completely works. I mean, I can make a banner, you guys, about how I'm like on this side. Like I am team be quiet, okay? Team keep it to yourself. Okay, sometimes we have to learn to keep it to ourselves, especially when we are in the waiting game. And this was a waiting game moment for me. And I'm telling you, the conversations that others were sharing with me and trying to tell me, and what their opinions were and what I need to do and what they thought and all of this, it was too chaotic, it was too messy, and it was solving nothing, but it was making pure chaos to the point where I wasn't sure what I should do next. And that's not where I wanted to be at all, right? So sometimes in the waiting game, you have to find out what works for you. And for me, having a whole bunch of opinions that was clashing didn't work for me. So I had to learn to go back to what I knew and keep quiet, keep it to myself, and just wait, and listen to what the Lord was saying and what I needed to do next. That was very important. So, all of us are going to have these moments. All of us is going to have these challenges that come into our lives, and it's so important and it's imperative that we understand that the position that we or the posture that we hold ourselves in at that time is so important. We're going to wait. You're going to be in this waiting game, you guys. You're going to be in this waiting game, waiting for that email, that phone call, that text, that deposit, that deposit, right, to take care of your responsibilities. And you put in the work and you're waiting on the deposit, right? And we all have those moments, but I promise you it will happen. I promise you it will come. But it is imperative for your own mental health, your own physical health, because these things play a huge part in the waiting game. Because if you're wearing yourself out and stressing yourself out, it's going to take effect to your body, your mind. We always talk about that here on this podcast, that when we allow things to affect us mentally, it will affect us physically eventually. And the same thing physically can affect your mental state of mind. So we have to be healthy. We have to take another approach, look at it from another perspective, and do what we need to do during these waiting game moments. Somebody might be waiting on a test to come back for COVID, wonder if they have COVID or not. You've seen all the stories and heard all the horror stories about it, so they're worried and they're in this waiting game, right? So how do you do that? Do you sit there and think about start Googling every person that have had COVID and the horror stories? Is that the position you should be taking when you're waiting for a COVID result? No, definitely not. So we have to make wise decisions as we are facing the waiting game. It is very important because these things will affect you in the long run. They will affect how your mental health and your physical health. And so it's important that we make sure that we are handling these situations and not letting them handle us. Listen, it has been my honor and pleasure, as always, to be able to share some little tips and some tools with you that I know that will assist you in becoming a better you. It's never too late to click that reset button and start all over again. If this podcast has helped you, please make sure that you are supporting this podcast. Share this podcast. Send this podcast out to someone else. You want to keep hearing it on this platform, please do that, because in order for us to continue, we need to get that support. And for those who are already supporting on a regular basis, God bless you and thank you so very much for doing that. Consider donating to this podcast. We appreciate all help that we can receive. Thank you guys so much for this day and this opportunity to be able to share with you. I hope that you got something from it. Please remember to follow us on social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I am there. And please keep in mind, on November 11th, we will have a guest, and we will be talking about surviving cult as a child, that type of trauma. And so this is going to be very important for those especially who have had this type of experience. So we want to hear from you also. Listen, look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you for listening to Renewed Mind Revolution podcast with your host, Michelle Cookall. God bless.